Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of SuperPsyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. SuperPsyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Wouldn't you love to have more energy? I believe that's on just about every living person's wish list. Energy can feel like that elusive fountain of youth that we thirst for to hydrate our souls. But there's a problem. We tend to seek energy replenishment in the wrong ways. In the pursuit of energy, we generally reach for coffee, energy drinks, or food. But even if those methods provide temporary relief, we still come up short after a few hours. What if I told you that in 30 days, you could have more energy? Would you be skeptical? Might you also be interested? I was very interested, and when I learned that a SuperPsyched guest, Dr. Michael Breus, had written a book on the topic, I invited him back for another interview. Michael is widely considered one of the top sleep experts in the world, and we met for episode number 10, The Science of Sleep. Recently, he leveraged his knowledge of sleep and restoration and teamed up with SoulCycle founding instructor Stacey Griffith in authoring a book called Energize, Go From Dragging Ass to Kicking It in 30 Days. The book lays out personalized, scientifically researched plans to increase our energy, and as it turns out, it's way easier to obtain than you might think. I loved the book and have begun implementing the recommendations in my own life, as have people like Ariana Huffington, who said, if you're sick of feeling tired and burned out, this is the book for you. And as always, the content on SuperPsyched is for informational purposes only and not intended to diagnose or provide any kind of healthcare treatment. For that, please consult your doctor. So join Michael and me as we explore the science behind increasing your energy. Dr. Michael Breus, who has asked me to call him Michael, welcome back to SuperPsyched.
Dr. Adam Dorsey asked me to call him Adam. Thank you for having me on SuperPsyched.
Excellent. That is maybe the funniest response I've ever had to my welcoming. You are my very first two-timer. You are my first invite to come back. As soon as I found out about this book, Energize, I was beyond stoked. It's almost as if the title of the book was literally written for SuperPsyched. Michael, I think it's safe to say that most people living today desperately want more energy. And as they aim to get it in ways, they are saddened to find out that they're not effective. And especially during the pandemic, which, University of Pennsylvania professor Adam Grant has described it as a time of languishing. The desperation is higher than ever. And in your book, as a world-renowned sleep expert, you and your co-author, a sought-after exercise expert, brilliantly highlight ways that actually work. And I was wondering if we could even talk about just the ways that people are saddened to find out that ways that you hear most frequently, particularly, I'm guessing, like energy drinks and others that people are shocked to learn that not only do they not work, but they oftentimes may be counterproductive in terms of their energy in the long term.
So energy in and of itself has been an interesting topic for me. And to go backwards just a little, in my third book, The Power of When, which you were so gracious in having me on your show. So thank you once again. It was a little bit easier because it was very easy to measure. You can measure circadian rhythms. You can measure sleep, the stages, the cycles, all of that stuff. But here's the thing. Why do we sleep? We sleep to have energy the next day, to spend time with our family, with our friends, to work, do all these things. So it was like I was going along doing this thing that I didn't really completely understand how it worked. So I understood one component very well, sleep, but there were multiple components of something like energy. And that became very interesting to me. And so then I decided, okay, well, what is energy? You kind of have to double tap down and figure that out. So we started thinking about it, and I came up with 5 different energy types. And that's one of the things that we talk about in the book. We don't only go over 4 energy types, and I'll explain why we didn't go over the 5th one in just a second. So there's food energy, which is fuel. that kind of makes sense. We understand that. And in the book, we talk about time restricted feeding or intermittent fasting. We'll definitely get into that one. There's moving energy. That was Stacey's specialty. So, and I want to be clear, moving energy and exercise are two completely different things. Moving energy is simply getting people to move during the daytime so they don't feel stagnant.
Yeah.
They don't like kind of lock up and zoom out and not be able to move their body. There's emotional energy, one of my favorite topics. That's the one that you and I were talking about a little before the show. I'm sure we'll talk more about it. And then there's, of course, resting energy, which is different than sleep, by the way. And then there's a fifth kind, which is spiritual energy. The one we didn't go into in the book was spiritual energy, and I'll tell you why. We could write a whole book on just spiritual energy. Honestly, there's so much interesting stuff out there.
In a single sentence, what is spiritual energy?
I think spiritual energy is the ability of some type of spiritual environment or outcome changing your motivation, either up or down.
Whether it's group meditation or going to perhaps a place of worship.
Exactly.
Be like that.
You could be,
given that we're social beings, that being in a collective of some kind.
You could be in an ashram, you could be in a synagogue, you can be in a mosque, you could be in a church. It doesn't matter. But when you get there and you participate in that, it changes you energetically. It changes how you feel.
Totally.
And that's, I think, also another important aspect. So when looking at energy, here was the big thing that, and to answer your question, people said to me that they're like, they only seem to notice when they're at low energy, right?
True. Rather than when they're doing well or.
Hey, like nobody calls me up and is like, Michael, I got too much energy. Knock me out. Can you tone me down a bit? Nobody ever calls me for that. So step one was energy assessment because we really don't have a great metric for it. And so we borrowed Gunnar Borg's ratings of perceived exertion scale. Now, this is a scale that's used in exercise science all the time. And it's about how much effort you have to put into an exercise. Is it 0 or is it 10? Like how much energy and effort are you putting in there? So,
spending, yeah.
Right. So what we do is we ask people to monitor their energy personally 5 times throughout the day. So right after you wake up, then a little before lunch, a little after lunch, before dinner, and before bed. So 5 separate times. We ask you to take your cell phone, put alarms in there, and then just 0 to 10 for 7 days. You just mark, because then it tells you where your energy flow is.
Brilliant.
Which is also going to be based on your chronotype.
And it's going to change throughout the day.
That's correct. I love it when people...
It's as if I've read the book.
I love it when people...
Which I have and loved.
Thank you. By the way, where my energy low is might be very different than where your energy low is. Number 1, based on chronotype. Number 2, based on all the 4 different energies: food energy, moving energy, resting energy, and emotional energy. So finding that zone of low energy is step number 1. Then we go in and we define all these different energies like we've done here. And then we flip things around a little bit. And we're going to get people to move based on these 5 energetic times. So you take the exact same times, and by week 2, you flip around and you do what's called the 5x5, which is our movement schedule developed by Stacey, where those 5 times where you were checking in on your phone to see how energetically, challenged you may be.
What's my baseline? Yeah.
Exactly. Now you're going to be able to do something at each one of those times to help affect that energy in a positive way with physical movement. So we're going to feed you throughout the day, whether you like it or not. Right?
And it sounds like the food that you're feeding is actually movement. You have often referred to the common axiom, which is sitting is the new smoking, and that these people who boast about how little they sleep, they may as well be boasting about how many cigarettes they've smoked as well.
Exactly.
Because we also know that that is carcinogenic, the absence
100%.
of sleep. So you're really speaking to the idea of getting energy may not be what you think it is. There are several different types. There are different body types that we need to consider. There are different chronotypes that we need to consider. So it's not going to be a one size fits all proposition. And it may not be as hard as people think it will be. The things that you're prescribing actually are incredibly doable. You're not asking them to go do an hour on the Peloton. You're saying 5 minutes, 5 times a day, different times a day, depending on your chronotype, perhaps including your body type, which I think is fantastic. For me, I mean, obviously the things that I hear about that people use erroneously are things like these so-called energy drinks.
Yes.
And
so let's talk about those.
Sure.
So when you look at energy drinks and sort of how do they work and what do they do, they're almost all exclusively stimulant based. So it's either caffeine or something called guarana is the other thing that people have attended. Now, for folks out there who don't know, guarana is actually double potent caffeine, okay, in a natural form. And the FDA doesn't require that they put the milligrams of guarana on there. It's just like on the label. And so if it's very high in the ingredient list, by the way, the first ingredient on any ingredient list is the thing that's the most in that product. So if you see guarana in the first 2 or 3 ingredients, you're basically pouring caffeine.
You're mainlining caffeine.
Exactly. So when you think about caffeine, there's pros and cons. Don't get me wrong. Caffeine's a reasonable substance. It can do some good things. It can help with focus. It can help with a little bit of attention. It might even keep you a little bit more alert, but it's not a replacement for sleep. A lot of people are like, oh, I only slept 5 hours. I'll just drink 3 cups of coffee. It really doesn't work that way. In fact, the more sleep deprived you are, the less effective caffeine actually is because it's fighting that sleep deprivation. If you were a well-slept individual and you drank a cup of coffee, you'd be on the moon. Whoosh. So when people have to think about it, you have to think, okay, number one, what is the state in which I'm in before I ingest the caffeine? That's number one. Number two, how much caffeine am I sticking in my body? So if you talk to the National Sleep Foundation, their recommendation has been anything below 200 to 250 milligrams a day is okay. So what does that mean? That's 2 cups of coffee.
Sure.
Okay. So a black cup of coffee, reasonable size, not like some mochaccino, frappy, whatever it's called. That's about 110 milligrams of caffeine for an 8-ounce cup of coffee. Okay. They're allowed to have 2 of those during the day. Here's the pieces of information that nobody knows. The half-life of caffeine, which means that half of it is still in your system, is 6 to 8 hours, depending upon how fast your metabolism is.
Wow.
So, right.
A lot
so
longer than one would think.
A lot longer than one would think. Exactly. So if you stop drinking caffeine at 2 p.m., at 10 o'clock at night, 50% of the caffeine is still on board. Here's the scarier number that I'm going to show you.
Okay.
The quarter life, which means that 25% of the caffeine is left on board, is 12 hours.
Oh boy.
So if you have your last cup of coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 25% of that is still swimming around your head at 2 a.m.
What's interesting is since reading your book, I have actually kept it. I know that you've endorsed taking my cup of coffee a little bit later. I do take it in the morning, and I've replaced my afternoon incredible amounts of caffeine that I used to take with what's in this cup, which you cannot see inside, but it would be guava tea, something that you actually endorse.
I love guava tea.
And I'm super down with it.
Great.
Actually, everybody in my family is loving guava tea, as well as banana tea, which we may talk about at some point, which is something you describe in the book, which was hilarious and something I never would have heard of had you not mentioned it. So what we don't know is that in this pursuit for energy, we are basically paying a credit card with huge interest.
Yes.
And the interest shows up at around 8 p.m. to midnight. We have the half-life still circulating in our system, in the quarter life at the very least, when we're trying to go to sleep, which is exactly what we're needing to do to restore ourselves.
Now, here's where it gets even more interesting is when you start to learn more about people's personalities, you also start to learn that caffeine can have different effects on people's personalities. So in particular, one of the chronotypes that I have is called a dolphin. So this is an individual who has a lot of insomnia, who is a little bit more on the anxious side, things like that. These people should not be drinking caffeine, period. End of story.
At all,
if they can avoid it. Because what's happening is they're vibrating at a higher intensity level, right? They're anxious. They're high up there. Their energy is very, very high. Now, I will tell you that I have had a couple of cases where caffeine has helped focus their energy before. But as a general guideline, if you've got a level of anxiety that prevents you from falling asleep at night, you don't need any caffeine on it. Period. End of story.
Even if mainlined early in the day.
Yeah. Well, and here's the other aspect. And let's talk about this. How long is the effect of caffeine physically on you that you recognize? It's not very long.
So true.
You drink a cup of coffee, 25 minutes later, you start to feel a little bit more energized. How long does that last? Maybe a half an hour, maybe an hour if you're lucky, depending if you drank it with nothing else in your stomach. Because if you had any food in your stomach, it's not going to last. So what ends up happening? You get a second cup.
Sure.
It's like the gambler's fallacy. It's like, I'm going to pull the slot machine and eventually it's going to work. And You're just
Totally.
walking along, caffeining out, and it's really not energy. The other thing, to be very fair, I mean, having written a book on energy, we're looking for pure energy. We're looking for self-sustained energy that comes from within, because to be honest with you, it doesn't run out. And if it does start to wane, you can pick it back up again without having to re-administer everything that you normally would do. So with caffeine, you have to re-administer. You have to drink another Red Bull or an Amp or a Monster or whatever the heck you're doing. And let's also be fair. Those things aren't good for your gut. I mean, if you want to talk about your microbiome, and pouring caffeine down it every single day at copious amounts is not good for your gut microbiome and flora. It's just not. So there's a lot of better things people could do.
Including those endorsed in your book. And before we even get into the recommendations, let's geek out to chronotype as well as body type. First off, you identify the 4 animals that you've created based upon the research on our circadian rhythms. And I think they're brilliant. I so wish I was a bear, but let's talk about the bear, the lion, the wolf, and the dolphin.
Absolutely. So there are 4 chronotypes. And if people out there don't remember what a chronotype is, you may not have heard the word chronotype, but you've definitely heard of the concept before. If you've ever been called an early bird or a night owl, those are chronotypes. And those are the ones we're talking about in particular. So about 7 years ago, I started looking at these. I had a patient who, quite frankly, didn't fit into any categories. And I failed with her. I mean, I failed miserably with her. We were really trying to figure it out, but she was terrible at work. She was an extreme night owl, was what she was, what I call a wolf. And we didn't discover it for a while until we changed her schedule at work. And then all of a sudden, her boss called me up and was like, I got 5 more employees I need you to deal with because this isn't working, right? And so understanding that we have a genetic chronotype becomes very important. So I wish I could tell people, hey, you can turn yourself into an early bird or you can turn yourself into a night owl. You can force it, but it doesn't last for very long. So there are people who are genetically early birds. Now, this happens based on something called the PER3 gene. There's what's called a single nucleotide polymorphism, or a SNP, that occurs, which is a flip-flop of the anatomical building blocks, or the DNA building blocks is actually a more accurate statement, that flips them. And then with that flip, all of a sudden your body wants to stay up late or wants to go to bed early.
That's fascinating. You've even mentioned that we could possibly even tell through a genetic test like 23andMe how we rock.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, for anybody who's listening, if you happen to have done 23andMe, they have a morningness and eveningness report that is basically the same idea as chronotype. So it's actually quite fascinating. I mean, again, this is real science, real genetics, right? Like, of course,
this isn't flavor of the month.
Right. It's not like
speculation. This is based on large quantities of data.
Exactly. So we've got early birds, but to be honest with you, I changed the names because I'm a mammal, not a bird. And I wanted to identify with an animal such as myself. Now, here's the interesting part, Adam, and you'll get a real kick out of this, is when I was writing the book, we wanted to come up with avatars for these 4 different types. And I said, I want to do animals. And people were like, okay, animals are good. And I wanted animals that actually represented the type that I'm assigning them. Okay. So I wanted to pick an animal that was an early bird or an animal that was a night owl. Well, as you can imagine in the marketing meeting, it turns out nobody wants to be a porcupine. Nobody wants to be a platypus. Right? So we had to find animals that were inspirational, but yet also met the chronotypical criteria.
Yes.
So early birds turn into lions. Let's be honest. Who doesn't want to be the king of the jungle? Lions are awesome. People love to be a lion. I am not a lion. By the way, people have lion envy, believe it or not, where they wish they were a lion. Now, to be clear, these people get up between 4:30 and 5:30 in the morning. Okay. And there's a lot of interesting aspects to lions. They're kind of militant in their thinking. They go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, oftentimes like the COO of a company where they're ordering people around and getting things done type of person. I mean,
sure.
These are the people that send emails at like 5 a.m. But to be clear, it's not the greatest to be a lion. And I'll tell you why. Because dinner and a movie is out. They've been up since 4:30 in the morning. They don't want to go out and party. They want to go to bed. So there's social detriment that might come, whereas the financial might work out better for you or career might work out better for you. So that's a lion. The people in the middle, we used to call them hummingbirds. We call them bears now. Who doesn't want to be a big old teddy bear, right? I mean, it's perfect.
I actually have bear envy. That's the one I wanted to be.
I want to be a bear too. Being a bear is the best.
Being the bear's best.
I know. Well, because society works on a bear schedule. Believe it or not, there's 55% of society is a bear. So 1 in 2 people is a bear. Now, we have learned, we've had over 1.5 million people take the quiz now. So we have learned that there are early bears and there are late bears, meaning there are people who fall into the bear category, but like to go to bed a little bit later or a little bit earlier, but not to the extent of a night owl or a lion, if you will. My last one, or my third one rather, are the night owls, which is what the category that I fall into, which is the wolf. Now, we all know wolves are very nocturnal creatures. They hunt at night and things like that. So it's cool to be a wolf. But to be fair, being a wolf is not the easiest chronotype. I would argue it's the second most difficult chronotype to be. And this is because most people think we're lazy. I don't like mornings. I tell people all the time, if we can do it in the afternoon, I'm down. But in the morning time, forget it. It's not for Michael. And so for me, I've always had difficulty in the morning time. Just thinking straight in the morning is difficult for me sometimes. So really understanding chronotypically where I land is good. Now, one other thing that's interesting about night owls like myself, we have a tendency to be artistic. So a lot of my actors, my musicians, my artists are night owls. And if you talk to any of these very creative people and you say, hey, when do you do your most creating? It's 2:00 in the morning after. Sure. They're like, oh, I was playing on my guitar at 3 a.m. and I came up with this new riff. Who are you, dude? Like, what's going on here? So night owls are a very unique breed. The most difficult chronotype I would argue to be is the dolphin. And the dolphin is the insomniac. Now, to be clear, the first three that we went over, those have been around since the 70s. I had very little to do with that. The fourth chronotype is what I did have a lot to do with, which was I noticed that there was a genetic insomnia that really fit nicely next to these other chronotypes. So I've incorporated a fourth chronotype, which I call the dolphin. Now, people always ask, why'd you choose a dolphin? So number one, dolphins are pretty cool. But interestingly, dolphins sleep unihemispherically. So half of their brain is asleep while the other half is awake and looking for predators. And I thought that feels like my insomniacs who are never quite asleep. So I felt like that made a lot of sense. And so once we had the vernacular and we understood the four chronotypes, we created a quiz and we got people to take the quiz. So for folks out there, if you haven't done it already, go to chronoquiz.com and you can learn what your chronotype is. Now, what's great about the chronotype is this tells me exactly when my hormones are going to be at their highs or be at their lows. And then I can time things throughout my daytime to tell me when to do things. So that's why the book was called The Power of When to Do Things. And so once you learn your chronotype, which was again, book 3, now we move one step forward and we look at your energy based on your chronotype. So that's where it gets really super cool. So the sleep stuff is relatively similar to the stuff that was in the third book. We have added some updates, some new research that's in there. So I do recommend that people check that part out. But what we've actually discovered now is we can use chronotype in other areas, not just sleep. And the big one that I used it in for myself was intermittent fasting. And so that was a really interesting way to start to wander into the whole idea. Now, to be fair, I've been an intermittent faster for about 5 years. And I started realizing that I could make it more effective if I did it based on my chronotype. Because who tells you when you're supposed to fast? That's the thing that drives me crazy. It's like, okay, everybody, intermittent fasting is good for you and you've got autophagy and all this important stuff. But by the way, we're not going to tell you when to fast. We're not going to tell you how long to fast. We're just going to tell you that you should fast. What we did in the book was we discovered that based on your chronotype, you can change when you fast. And so I start eating at around 11 to 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll eat until about 8 or 9 in the evening. That's my window as a wolf or as a night owl for when I should fast. Now, here's where it got really interesting was when I hooked up with Stacey, my co-author, she started telling me about movement. And I started to ask her questions like, how do you know what exercises to prescribe to your clients to make sure that they stay motivated? And she's like, oh, well, I do it based on their bodies. It's like, okay, explain. So she was like, well, for people who are lean, I keep them on the cardio side. For people who are a little bit thicker, I don't start them out on cardio because they'll never get through it. They'll demotivate and they'll never come back to class. And I'm like, oh, so you're using people's body types to determine what kind of exercise. And she was like, yeah, I guess I am. And so I started thinking back to high school. So you know where I'm headed with this is high school biology, right? Endomorph, mesomorph, ectomorph. Like that was a big thing in high school biology. So I went back to look at the literature and I was like, this is going to work. So when you look at endomorph, mesomorph, ectomorph, and for a refresher for people, if you don't happen to remember all the way back to high school, Ectomorphs are the long and lean people. So they're usually a little bit taller, but very lean, very thin. Turns out they have a very fast metabolism. Mesomorphs, more of a V-shaped people. So their shoulders are a lot bigger than their waist. They hang meat on their skeleton in a more muscular way. Those people have a medium metabolism. And endomorphs, who have a tendency to be a bit more pear-shaped, carry a little bit of extra weight on their gut or in their rear end, those people have a tendency to have a slower metabolism. So when you dig into the research on body type, turns out it's all about metabolism. So what we then did was we started looking at the research and we developed an idea about how long you should fast. So if you go into my program and you know what your body type is and you know what your chronotype is, we create a power profile, which is a combination of your body type plus your chronotype. So let's take as an example, me. I'm a mesomorph, so I'm in the middle, and I'm a wolf. So I'm a medium wolf, which means I have a medium metabolism, but I'm a wolf nighttime person. So that actually tells you a tremendous amount. It tells you when to fast based on your wolf. And if it's medium, it tells you how long. And I'm going to give everybody the secret right now. So if you're an ectomorph, thin, long, and lean person, you would feed for 12 hours, fast for 12 hours. You're a mesomorph like me, you would feed for 10 hours and fast for 14 hours. Notice what I did there is I shrank it a little bit and made the fasting a slightly longer because as a mesomorph, I may want to trim down a little bit. If you're an endomorph where you are a little bit on the bigger side and you are looking to drop some pounds, then I would have you feed for 8 hours, fast for 16 hours. So notice what I did there is I switched it based on your body type. When we started doing this, we sent out questionnaires to people, to 5,000 people, and we started making these recommendations. It's like the weight is falling off of people.
Wow.
Intermittent fasting perspective. Now, I want to be very careful and say that if you do have a tendency or if you've ever been diagnosed with an eating disorder, intermittent fasting is not for you. I don't want you to get near it. There's a lot of data to suggest that it could actually exacerbate an eating disorder. So please, 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 if eating disorders is something that you've been struggling with or working on, intermittent fasting is not a good idea. Talk with your therapist.
You know, one of the great gifts of this book is it attends to an issue that happens by well-intended authors, and that is they try to give a one-size-fits-all, like they say, napping is good. And it turns out that napping is good for many, but many, it's not good. And such things as, let's see, what else might they say?
Sleep is a perfect example. Everybody should go to bed at 10:30. Nope. Doesn't work that way.
And when I was a kid, I'm sure you were raised with this axiom from Ben Franklin, early to bed, early to wise makes a man, well, healthy, wealthy, and wise. Well, it turns out, according to at least the chronotypes and the body types, maybe not. So a lot of people may be married or paired up with a person with a different type. How do they stay true to themselves and keep the relationship thriving?
So it's the perfect question to ask. And it actually also talks a little bit about emotional energy, which is part of this book as well. So I'm going to combine the two, if I may. So when we talk about couples, let's be honest, some people are on the same chronotypical wavelength and some people are not. When my wife and I first met, we were both night owls and it was great. I'd pick her up at 8 and we'd be at dinner at 8:30. We'd finish dinner by, 9:30, 10 o'clock, go to the movies, get out, go for a drink or dessert and get home at 2. And there was nothing. If she was an early bird, she'd be exhausted.
Totally.
But she wasn't. We were simpatico on our chronotypical wavelength, if you will. So number one, why doesn't Match.com ask chronotype? Right?
It might bode better for the sustainability of the relationship.
I am for sure certain that there's no question that Match.com would do. All of the dating sites would do better if people knew at least a little information about that. But let's continue down the
great point. I see a consultancy position opening up for you there.
I like where you're headed. So when you look at this and then you try to discover, well, when are the times that we can do certain things? So intimacy is usually the first question that people have. If I'm a night owl and they're an early bird, when are we going to be intimate?
Right.
How is something like that going to work? So,
by the way, when you say intimate, you mean sexual?
I do.
As well. Okay.
So intimacy, sexuality, all of the above. Like when do we have time to just spend time? So it's an interesting question. And we answered it in the third book. And we also answered it a little bit in this book as well. So from an intimacy perspective, it has a lot to do with hormones. In particular, when we're talking about if the two participants, if at least one of them is male, then testosterone turns out to be a big deal. So we took a look at it and we started to understand you need 5 hormones to be elevated in order to have successful intercourse. You need estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol, and adrenaline all need to be high. And melatonin, the sleep hormone, needs to be low. That's the general profile. So we did a survey. 74% of people have sex between 10:30 and 11:30 at night.
Exactly.
Probably surprised. Right? Not a big shocker there.
Except not the ideal time.
Exactly, but not the right time from a profile perspective. Because what are guys' profiles going to look like? All of the hormones that need to be high are low, and melatonin is high. We're bad. So that's one hint as to when intimacy might be better. Also, again, more from the male perspective than the female perspective, what do most men wake up with in the morning? So if that isn't Mother Nature telling you when to use that thing, I don't know. So when we're thinking about intimacy, we find times in the morning time where an early bird and a night owl might be able to hang out together. Also, communication in general becomes an important factor within a relationship. I'll give you a great example. So my relationship with my daughter was affected with the way I understood her chronotype. So my daughter, she's currently 18, but at the time she was 17, and I was in charge of waking her up in the mornings. I'd walk in, I'd say, Carson, good morning. Hope you're having a good day. What have you got on the plate today? She's 17 years old. All I get out of her is,
exactly.
Alone. I mean, classic adolescent. And by the way, that's supposed to happen because adolescents have a delayed sleep phase. So they're supposed to hate mornings. So when I walked into her room after school and I said the exact same thing, hey, Carson, how's it going? What'd you have on the plate today? I'm there for an hour and a half.
Okay.
And I get to spend time with my daughter. There's nothing more important than my daughter, except for maybe my son.
It gives new meaning to your former book's title, The Power of When. And even Emily Nagoski, who just wrote a great book on sexuality, and I believe it's called Come As You Are. And one of the most important things she talks about is the power of when. That oftentimes when one partner is trying to engage sexually with the other, it just happens to be the wrong time. And it doesn't mean that it's never going to be the right time. It just means that they're not on the same cycle. But the power of when has so many implications. I mean, we know intuitively that timing is everything. And yet we fail to see that as an important criterion in so many aspects of our lives.
And it's fascinating because time is the most valuable resource that we all have.
For sure.
I mean, everybody says the same thing. Time is important. Time is important. Time is important. And who we spend our time with and how we spend that time can also be energetically important. So as an example, moving back towards the Energize idea and emotional energy, there are people in our lives, maybe they're not our partners, but maybe there are people in our lives that are what I call emotional vampires. These are the people that just suck you dry. And I want to be clear about something. I've got emotional vampires in my life, but some of them are my friends who are hurting and need my help. And they don't know they're being emotional vampires. They're just needy at that particular time. Well, I want to be able to be a good friend and help them with that need, but I must also protect my own energy and be able to thwart times when somebody sucks all the life out of me so I can build myself back up to maintain my effectiveness in my life and my family and things like that. So in the book, we talk about this idea of emotional energy and how to have different things to jump around about it. So one of the things that you and I were talking about before the podcast was one of the interviews I did where we talked about my son, who was our morning DJ. And so when we talk about music, music is a great way to change your energetic profile like that.
Sure.
So when you're driving and one of your favorite song comes on, what do? You're bopping around. It's instant. It's like in a millisecond, right?
For sure.
Like, remember that old show, Name That Tune? Honestly, like I was really good at it. Like in 4 or 5 notes, like I know exactly what's on the radio, 4 or 5 notes, but it completely changes your energetic profile. The story that I was telling Adam before we got on was about my son. And so my son is terrible in the mornings, as most teenagers are. And so we turned him into the morning DJ. The rule was he could put on whatever music he wanted, but it had to be at 7 a.m. was the start. And he could put it on in volume 10 if that's what he wanted to do. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, he got to do it. His sister got to do it Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. And so here's what ended up happening. His favorite was Throwback Time, the Beastie Boys. You have to fight for your right to party at 7 a.m. in the morning. Now, I have to tell you, at first you're thinking, oh my gosh, we had so much fun, dude.
Oh,
We were
so great.
the whole family's bopping around and we're yelling, you got to fight for your right to party. But it completely changes that terrible time in the morning that so many parents have with their children.
Somehow you made it playful and fun and you made it a win where it was previously in the negative zone. You put it in the +10 instead of -7.
Absolutely. So like as an example, my kids were emotional vampires for me at 6:30 in the morning because it would just suck the life out of me trying to wake them up every morning. I mean, it was terrible. So we energetically turned it into something fun and now everybody gets up on time.
Dude, you are a great camp counselor in the form of a father.
I am, dude. I am a camp counselor for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. As a fellow non-morning person, and I'm just going to come out and say, I am sadly a dolphin and I hate being a dolphin. I took your freaking test 3 times, altering certain variables, just hoping that if we squinted a little, I might somehow come out as something other than a dolphin, but I'm not.
Anybody who takes the quiz more than twice is automatic.
There's no question. You know, what if somebody's right on the cusp, though, of, especially in the book, between, say, bear and lion, if they took it out of your book and they were at around 31 or 32, which is right at the cusp, it's either low bear or high lion. What are they?
So I have people look at their parents because remember, it's genetic. So both of my parents were night owls. I can remember when I was a young boy, 7, 8, 9 years old, I could walk into my parents' room at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and they wouldn't even have their bedclothes on.
Oh, for sure.
And then there were times where once I got older, 11:30, 12 o'clock, again, nobody's even getting close to getting ready for bed. So if you're on the cusp there, then look to your parents because that can give you some better insight. And if you just identify with one more than the other, that's okay. Choose that one.
Got it. Yeah, I'm the son of, in all likelihood, a lion and a dolphin. So that's probably...
Yeah. Here's the great news for you. If we can get you past your dolphinness by using some of the techniques in the book, both Energize and in The Power of When, I would tell you that about probably between 25% and 30% of my dolphins, once they get their schedule locked and loaded, their true chronotype actually comes out. So some people are just messed up with like another type of insomnia that looks like the dolphin, but once we fix that, their true chronotype.
I really hope so. I would love to be a bear. I aspire to be a bear.
You have a greater likelihood to be a lion, believe it or not, as a dolphin, because lions and dolphins are super similar in terms of their intensity and things like that.
You have given some really great tips, including that perplexing experience of the person who wakes up in the middle of the night to go pee and then needs to go back to sleep and can't fall back asleep. What is your favorite tip?
So this is going to be a slightly longer answer than you probably want, but I'm going to give people a lot of detail and a lot of possibilities here. Okay. So number one, when you wake up in the middle of the night, don't look at the clock.
Yes.
Don't do it. Don't do it because you instantly do the mental math and then you get pissed off. It's 3:30 in the morning and I got to be up at 6. Sleep. And you try to force yourself to sleep. Okay. It doesn't work, folks. Sleep is a lot like love. The less you look for it, the more it's right? When you're out there looking for that perfect person, you never find them. The second you stop, guess what? It actually works itself out. So in trying to sleep, what you actually do is you cause autonomic arousal. So to get super geeky, when you're forcing yourself to sleep, you're increasing your heart rate, you're changing your hormonal production level and not in the way that's positive for sleep. So number one, don't look at the clock. Now I'm going to be clear. Everyone looks at the clock. It doesn't matter if I tell you not to look at the clock. You do it anyway. I even look at the clock on occasion. Okay. It's like one of those things that just drives you nuts.
Sure.
Here's what you do. Instead of looking at the clock, here's what you say. Oh, I have a new opportunity in front of me. That's number one. Number two, this is actually positive. Now, many people realize that if you actually woke up at, let's say 3:30 in the morning, and you couldn't fall back asleep, the world is not going to end. You're going to make it through. You've made it through before. So number one, the worst of it is over. If you woke up and you stay up, you know what that's like. It's not a lot of fun, but again, it doesn't completely crush your entire existence. That's number one. Number two, there's now data on something called non-sleep deep rest. This is something relatively new. I heard about it through Dr. Andrew Huberman, if you're familiar with him. He does a really interesting podcast called Huberman Lab, but he talks about non-sleep deep rest. And so what this means is you can lie in bed, your eyes closed, and you can get some rejuvenation. Now, to be clear, it's not the same as sleep, but if you lay there for an hour, it's worth about 20 minutes of sleep. So when you wake up in the middle of the night and it's 3:30 in the morning, here's what you tell yourself. Oh, I have a unique opportunity. I can lie here, close my eyes, and I'm still going to get a level of rejuvenation because Dr. Breus has told me about the research. That's number one. Number two, if that lowers my anxiety level, the natural sleep process has a tendency to take over and allow me to fall right back to sleep. So not stressing in the middle of the night, acceptance in the middle of the night turns out to be really important. And when we talk about sleep, there's really two angles by which I think about sleep. There's discipline and there's acceptance. Discipline is all the things we're telling people. Wake up at the same time every day. Watch your caffeine intake. Watch your alcohol intake. Don't have big emotional discussions before bed. Learn your chronotype. That's the discipline. Here's the thing. You can do everything right and still not sleep. That's acceptance. If something's going on with my daughter, I don't sleep well. It doesn't matter what I do. I could take 3 Ambien if that's what I wanted to do. And if something's going on with her, I ain't sleeping. So remember, it's okay to not have a good night. I'm the sleep doctor. Do you think I have a perfect night every night? Of course not. So again, when you're in the middle of the night and you're sitting there looking at the clock, getting pissed off, remember, this is an acceptable situation. It's not going to happen every single night. By the way, it's very rare that people have more than 2 bad nights in a row. Usually by the 3rd night, they're so damn exhausted, they're going to do fine. So I give people that kind of counseling. Now, I'm also going to give people some tactics of exactly what to do when they're lying there relaxing. Okay. One thing you can do, 4-7-8 breathing.
Yeah.
My favorite technique.
Love that one.
Andrew Weil developed it for the Navy SEALs a zillion years ago. And it really helps dump that extra carbon dioxide that's normally lying in your lungs, lowering your heart rate. Here is the most important statistic that I can tell all of your listeners, which is in order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of 60 or below. So 4-7-8 breathing, it dumps your heart rate well below 60, literally in like 4 or 5 cycles. So when you're lying there, you breathe in for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 7, breathe out for a count of 8. 5 or 6 cycles of this. And number one, it really slows you down. And don't be like, I'm all the hard. Like, it's got to be a relaxed, kind of effortless process. So that's one of the techniques that I use in the middle of the night. Very effective. One thing, if people tell me, Michael, I wake up and I just can't turn off my brain. That's a very, very common thing for me to hear. One of my favorites is counting backwards from 300 by 3s. It's mathematically so damn complicated. You can't think of anything else. And it's so doggone boring. You're out like a light.
That's awesome. And I'm wondering, it's interesting because if you're counting 4-7-8, which I'm a huge fan of, and I've even done it when I was in a rush to get to Kaiser. And the first thing they do when you get to Kaiser is they put a blood pressure cuff on you. And of course, you've been navigating traffic, the parking, and just barely making it there on time. And of course, your blood pressure is abnormally high, including because of the white coat syndrome.
Right.
And if you do the 4-7-8 a few times, you will, at least I did, have a more normal blood pressure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's amazing.
What's great about this 4-7-8, dude, I use it all the time, all over the place. So like, as an example, if I'm training in athletics, like let's say I'm about to do a run, like a timed run. Well, I want my heart rate to be nice and steady. At that point, I might do 4-7-8 breathing before I do that. If I'm about to give a presentation in front of a large audience, like I get nervous like anybody else does, I'll do 4-7-8 breathing, drops my blood pressure. I'm good to go. So this is a technique you can utilize 24/7 if you needed to.
So I'm thinking, as we're counting the 4-7-8, and if we're trying to count backwards, we obviously can't do both.
But you can't do them both at the same time. To be clear, you do one or the other.
Sure.
But what I have a tendency to have people do is people who have a bit of more physical anxiety, I have them do the 4-7-8. And for people who've got more mental anxiety, I have them do the counting. And that's the order in which I have them do them. But you can do either one. It's not a big deal.
And you know what's interesting is oftentimes I'll hear people describe something that I actually must confess that I've been guilty of. And that is not having good sleep, but also not putting into practice basically the methods. I would sit in bed watching Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad before sleep, even though I would tell people in my office, don't do that. It's like, the only time I'm going to be able to watch these shows is in bed. It turns out very bad idea. Now, although you endorse only sleep and sex in bed, I will read off my Kindle paper.
Oh, no. I don't mind reading. I actually don't even mind television at times, depending upon what the TV is.
So you are saying that reading in bed is okay?
Reading in bed is okay. Even watching television in bed is okay to a point. So as an example, my wife falls asleep with the television on every single night. Every night. We've been married for 22 years. When we first met, she turned to me and she said, Michael, if we ever happen to have a sleepover, I want to let you know I fall asleep with the TV on. I was like, oh, hon, don't worry about that. I'm going to be a sleep doctor. I'm going to fix that. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else, but if you tried to fix something in your heart, good luck.
Yeah, for sure.
So it didn't work very well, but I studied her because when I removed the television, she told me to get my ass out of the bedroom. So then I put the TV back in. So I was allowed back in. And I studied her. And what I discovered was that she really wasn't even watching it half the time. She was listening to it out of the corner of her ear. Now, what you did was a little bit different. If you're watching Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones.
Which, by the way, I want to be clear, I do not do, and I haven't done in years, and much to my benefit.
I'm not saying anything against those shows, but what I
love those shows.
I do too. What I'm saying is that the emotional valence that is attached is unnecessary. So here's what my wife does. She watches an old episode of Seinfeld. So it's something that's got enough of attention that you have to pay to it, but not so much attention that you want to remember the details so you can get on to the next episode. Does that make sense?
800%. I did that with Parks and Recreation, something with which I was familiar. Yeah, it's not too high energy. It has a smaller emotional valence, to use your term, which I think is a great one. And I also had come across something in the literature indicating that doing something funny before sleep is actually soporific.
So optimism before bed not only helps you fall asleep more quickly, but it gives you more positive dreams.
So you are saying watching something familiar and funny, but not so stimulating.
Exactly. And to be clear, remember, most people are watching, if you will, with their eyes closed. They're just listening. So there's really, and by the way, you can put a TV timer on 99% of the televisions out there. They've already got them in their software, guys. And if you can't figure it out, ask your kid. They'll know exactly how to turn it on and off. Because that's what I did. I asked my son and he helped me figure it out. And so it works out just fine. Now, I will tell you that there are lots of different environmental issues that can occur between couples during sleep that can have a major effect on sleep. The biggest one is snoring. And so if one person snores, the other person didn't get in such a great night's sleep. And so relationships can be completely set on end based on one snoring bed partner. Like we were talking about Match.com before, snoring turns out to be a big deal as well.
And nothing can be as primally evocative as having your sleep interrupted, even if it's by somebody you absolutely adore. I'm finding myself thinking about some of the other hacks that include one of the European solutions, which is having side-by-side twin XL mattresses so that you don't feel the movement, and having your own set of sheets may be helpful to those who have different chronotypes. And statistically, in all likelihood, we will marry somebody with a different chronotype.
More than likely. Yeah, more than likely. Yeah, I think there's all kinds of different solutions there. And I think there's lots of ways that people can go about doing it. But, you know, when you think about couples and you think about relationships and how do those work together, sleep becomes a primary aspect of that without people really knowing. So a lot of people don't think about it, but when you're cranky because you haven't slept well, you're not a good person to date.
Totally. And we are insufferable, except we just don't know it. We think in our own minds, and as much as we can't hear the sound of our own voice as somebody else hears it, we also can't hear how irritating we are when we're irritable. So my irritability is entirely explainable. Well, actually, it still sucks.
Exactly. But one of the things that's been fun with the book has been getting people to do the movement programs together. So as an example, I know right now, a lot of people are at home because of COVID, right?
Sure.
And because of work restrictions and like, where does your house start and your office start? And how does that whole thing kind of work? And so totally understand where people are at on that one and trying to understand that. We developed a movement program for people. And again, you said it earlier, sitting is the new smoking, right? We want to avoid that. So we just want to get people up. And so the 5 times of energy that you monitor during the day, we flip that into these 5 different movement categories. So if I can, I'm going to briefly explain what it is because they work and they're a lot of fun. So the very first one, so instead of monitoring your energy in the morning, you're going to stretch. Kind of makes a lot of sense, right? I've been lying in bed, hopefully for 6, 7, 8 hours. stretching the body around. It's going to do some good, getting the juices flowing, if you will. I have some couples who actually do this while brushing their teeth. So they'll be brushing their teeth, doing their morning stretches and things like that. Again, just a way to get themselves going,
blood moving
in the morning, get the blood flowing, thing like that. Then just before lunch, you do a shake. So a shake might be shaking your hand, shaking your legs, shaking your head. You ever notice dogs when they get up after they stretch? What do? They do this. Really wakes them up. And so that's where we got this idea from, is to just do a little shake. Again, I want to be clear. These are not exercises. These are movements. You're not going to sweat. You could do these in a full 3-piece suit if that's what you were wearing, or in flip-flops and shorts if that's what you wanted to do. It doesn't matter either way.
Brilliant.
The third one is called a bounce. So literally jumping up and down, jumping jacks, one of those little mini trampolines that a lot of people probably have in their closet that they haven't used in like forever. That's a good one to do. Skipping, believe it or not, is a bounce. So yes, I've been skipping down my street and my neighbors already think I'm crazy.
And it sounds like you've already done a cost benefit analysis and you've determined that it's worth the cost of them thinking you're crazy.
It is worth crazy for sure. But what's so funny about it is it's so energetic.
Oh, heck yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Here's what you need to do, buddy. You need to actually have a t-shirt when you're skipping. It says, "Don't judge till you try it."
That's a great idea. I think I might do that, as a matter of fact. That's a good one.
Sleep doctor endorsed.
Sleep doctor endorsed, for sure. The fourth one is called a build. And this is where you use a major muscle group. So you might do push-ups, you might do sit-ups, you might do deep knee bends, not to the point of sweating, just to the point of moving your body.
Yeah.
Because we're all locked into these Zoom calls. And again, many people aren't commuting any longer, so they don't even get to walk to their car, much less drive their car. So again, bigger movements on the build side. And then the final one is a balance. So we have people doing like a tree pose before bed, things like that. And what it does is it creates a focus for people at nighttime, because a lot of people's nighttimes are very scattered. So we have them do a balance, 25, 30 minutes before bed. And it really seems to settle them down, kind of gives them some runway, if you will, to land the plane.
I used to work in a Japanese corporation in Osaka, and it was actually, believe it or not, it was a metal factory. And one of the things that, whether they were frontline dealing with the hot iron ore, or if they were metallurgists with master's or doctorate degrees, they in the morning did exercises first thing before work together. Maybe 10 minutes. Jumping jacks was definitely a part of it. And I was always flummoxed by the jumping jack exercise. I really didn't get it until just when I was reading your books, like, oh, jumping jacks. So it's not really about building muscle. It's actually just about moving the body. And they're brilliant. They're absolutely brilliant.
And if you think back, if you really want to look back at some of the origins of movement and some of the movements that we have, they fall very much in the lines of Ayurveda and Ayurvedic medicine and things of that nature. An example is Tai Chi and something called Qigong. So Qigong is very similar to a lot of these movements. If you'll notice, I actually had a Qigong master review them for me to make sure that they made sense from an energetic standpoint. But when you talk with these people about movement turns out to be an incredibly important part of their entire culture, the Asian culture, not just in the Japanese culture, of course, but in the entire Asian culture, we see a lot of them understanding that moving the body is an incredibly important thing to do on a daily basis.
I love that. I want to go back to just something that you dropped a little bit earlier. And that was, I think it's a brilliant differentiation between discipline and acceptance. And it reminds me of the serenity prayer in a way, because serenity prayer asks for the serenity to accept the things we cannot change and the courage to change the things we can. So in that, there is acceptance and discipline and the wisdom. And the wisdom of the difference. Right? And yes, exactly. And I'm thinking about how many times a week I'm not by any stretch an expert in dealing with 12-step issues. And yet the wisdom of that prayer, that serenity prayer, seems to be omnipresent, and it has found its way into sleep itself. I want to go into body sizes for a minute, because I think that was really another great way for us to ratchet down on how to energize ourselves. You use a wrist measurement system so that we can figure out where we fall in that biology.
So what you do is if you're looking at your hand, you take your thumb and the third finger in, second to third finger in, and you put it around your wrist. And if you can touch your fingertips, you're a mesomorph. If they overlap, you're an ectomorph. And if they don't touch, you're an endomorph. And it's one of the easiest physical markers to look at. But wrist size turns out to give you a good idea of what your body type.
And it's middle finger, not pointer finger.
Exactly. Not pointer, middle.
Okay, good. I'm like a legit mesomorph, perhaps.
Right.
Even.
So am I. I'm the same way.
And just carrying a little extra because I haven't exercised enough.
But so as an example, let's say you wanted to do some intermittent fasting and drop some weight. Now you know when to fast.
I have been doing it. I will say that I have begun the process of Energize. I just read it last week. My wife and I are already super stoked about implementing these so that we can stop dragging ass and kicking ass over the next 30 days. But wow, Michael, is there anything I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
So we've gone over quite a bit, and I really like where we've laid everything out. I will tell you that we talked about intermittent fasting, we talked about sleep, we talked about movement. All three of those are paramount in the book. One thing I want to be very clear with people on is this is simple and straightforward. So once you figure out your chronotype and your body type, I actually tell you exactly when to fall asleep and when to get up, exactly when to move and what movements to do. We're very prescriptive in this book. It's not like you have to go and figure this out, number one. Number two, it doesn't cost a dime other than to buy the book. So you don't have to have a lot of special equipment. You don't have to go do a bunch of testing, things of that nature. And so the design of the program was specifically for ease of use and to be highly effective as quickly as possible. Now, I will tell you, 30 days is a real number. This isn't something that we made up. We know that habits, it takes about 21 days for people to lock in a habit, according to BJ Fogg's research out of Stanford. And so we want to get people in that habitual movement schedule. And it takes a little while for people to get used to it and not be sore or things of that nature. So the big thing that I tell people all the time is do the full 30 days. I can assure you, you will be more energized by the end.
I love that. And I also just want to highlight something that you said in the book that I thought was so important. And that is, this is a plan that really involves the big three in a particular order: sleep, exercise, and diet. Yeah. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. What a great contribution. Michael, I'm so grateful for you for sharing your time, your wisdom with my listeners, and for your friendship. And I look forward to whatever happens next in your writing and professional world. It's always such a pleasure to see what you're up to.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you and having me here on the show. For folks, if they want to get the book, you can get it at Amazon, or you can go to energizemyself.com and take the quiz and learn a ton of stuff. Or you can always find me on any social media at The Sleep Doctor.
And all of this will be in, of course, the show notes. And yeah, I highly recommend this book. I had a blast going through it. And thanks again, Mike.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to SuperPsyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe.